we go. Oh, she's flying. Oh, that is a big fish. Oh my God. Wow. That is a really large fish. Yeah, that's really big. Holy shit. Get in the net. Oh my God. Holy crap. Oh my God. Oh, look at this thing. Oh, that is really big.
You really want me to do this?
I do.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to FlyFishDan's podcast, Fly Fishing and Stuff. Dan, fun fact. Dan does not need fins in his float tube because he wears a size 15 shoe.
And now here's the man, FlyFishDan.
Cheers. I had to talk to you about this while it was still fresh in my mind because I'm still in Bend, Madras, in a VRBO, and I just had a spectacular experience, and I just had to share it with you. So some of our podcasts together are going to be just storytelling, and I'm going to share some of my experiences, and I wanted to share this one while it was still fresh in the brain because I literally just got back, and as you can see, it is just pouring down rain. The day started out absolutely gorgeous, and it started out on a fishery that hasn't been fished for over 28 years, so nearly 30 years, and no one had caught a fish. There was one other group that went prior to me, but nobody landed a fish. No one landed a fish in almost 30 years in this fishery until today. So I'm just super excited to share this experience with you, and it's pretty cool. And I have to give big shout out to Elke and Alicia Little Leaf from Little Leaf Guide Services. Not affiliated. I paid for this trip, but I wanted to highlight just how awesome these two are. So they are a tribal guide service out of Warm Springs, and they guide on their entire reservation. And they get to go to some places that nobody else gets to go. There's a few places you can get a permit, but most cases you have to hire a guide. And I have to tell you, if you want to do and experience this, and I do encourage you to do that. Elke and Alicia, they really are just tremendous guides. They work hard. They're great human beings. We just really hit it off, and I just want to thank them again for this amazing trip. Thank you so much, and for this experience. I'm just so honored to have been a part of this. I mean, I'm just thrilled. So the fishery is Warm Springs River. And this particular section of the river, and I hope I don't mispronounce everything, but below the Taquitna Lodge, all the way to where it runs into the Deschutes, it has been closed for 28 years. No one's been allowed to fish it. So I got invited early on. The trip was off, then it was back on again, thank goodness. And I was able to fish this. I think I was a second or third group that they had taken out because we had a lot of rain and warm weather, and the runoff was huge. In fact, the river was still about 300 to 400 CFS bigger than it typically is, and it was a little bit colored up. So we knew there was going to be some challenges, both wading and catching fish. But there was a group prior to me that hooked into a couple fish, but as soon as they hooked in, it popped off. I guess the group wasn't as used to fishing with barbless hooks and just kind of some of the techniques you got to use there. So I had the opportunity to have the opportunity to be one of the first people to put a fish in the net in this particular virgin fishery for the past 30 years. I mean, so I'm so excited. And just thinking back, right? I mean, so Elke picks me up in this huge Suburban. The thing's raised up. It has tires on it like I haven't seen, back in the day. I had a pair of these tires on the Jeep for a while before we switched to a little less aggressive tread. And now I know why, right? Because we got into a situation later on in the day that if we didn't have those tires, we would have been in big trouble. So I'll talk to you a little bit later about what had happened. But it started out, right, the weather forecast was supposed to be about 65 degrees, partly sunny, with a 40% chance of showers after 3 o'clock. I need to take a drink. By the way, this is a screwdriver. Vodka orange juice. This is my drink of choice. So I'd hoped to get into some salmon flies, but we just haven't quite had the weather. We're a little bit early. We did see some salmon flies crawling around the grass and branches and that type of thing, but the fish weren't on them. The water clarity wasn't great and the river is still high. So we're probably still a couple weeks out before the salmon fly hatch really starts. So I was using a really big TJ hooker, kind of a leggy nymph, right? Stonefly nymph, squalid nymph, big nymph with lots of legs. And Alicia tied me on just like this little purple, it's almost like a purple prince nymph with some white rubber legs. And that was a money fly as well. The combination between those two got me into some pretty cool native red bands in this system. So the day we started about 10 o'clock, right? Because there's really no use to starting any earlier than that this time of year for this type of fishery. So we started at 10 and we headed down the river, and right in the beginning, I knew it was going to be a challenge, right? Because there wasn't a lot of bank access, even though we can fish anywhere we want to on this particular river system. So, we were fishing a couple areas, and I caught a couple little dinks and a couple takedowns. So, and I think they just released steelhead smolt into this river. So we were carefully releasing those smolt if we caught any of those. Well, we crossed over the bridge and we're kind of by an old golf course and kind of heading back upstream. And I was in pretty deep. I mean, I forgot to zip up one of my pockets of my waders, and I actually got a bunch of water inside. So I was very deep. And of course, those of you who know me, I'm tall, right? I'm 6'7", so that's saying something when I'm in that deep of water. But I waded up as far as I could, and there was just this beautiful bubble line to where the river kind of slowed down, and there was like a little creek coming off into the river system, maybe about 50 yards up. So I was doing, I call it the sling cast, right? To where I let everything drift down, and I just quickly take everything and just throw it back upstream, and was letting the indicator come back down. So I lowered the indicator a little bit just because I wasn't getting any action right away, and I saw how deep it was. And then all of a sudden, boom, that indicator went down, and I caught and landed the very first red band trout, very first trout in this river system since almost 30 years ago. How crazy is that? And that is something, I mean, how many fly fishermen can say that, right? That they were able to fish a virgin fishery. And what's really cool is this is the second time in my life that I've had this opportunity. Once was back in 1995 when my dad scored a permit to Coldwater Lake. Coldwater Lake, as you may or may not know, was formed by the eruption of Mount St. Helens. It immediately created this natural reservoir because the side of the mountain came down and blocked Coldwater Creek and created this 4 mile long, 1 mile wide reservoir. University of Washington came in I think it was 83, so it was about 3 years after the eruption, and planted it with fish, and it's been self-sustaining since then. So they took some fish out of the Cowlitz hatchery, put them in there, and actually we got some West Slope cutthroat mixed in with rainbow, so we have some hybrids and West Slopes in there as well. But I had the opportunity, before there was a launch, right? You had to start at Coldwater Lake, and you had to hike down 700 feet down to the lake's edge and fish. And my dad and I were there the very first weekend. I think there were maybe 10 permits given out that weekend. So we were amongst the first group to ever fish Coldwater Lake. And that experience, and gosh, I can't remember how old I was. I got to do some quick math, late 20s. It was so unique, right? Because there was no garbage. You can tell it was untouched, right? There's no trails. There's no trails down to the water. All the vegetation is just perfect, right? It was just this experience of being somewhere new, right? Because this was created by the volcanic eruption for the first time in forever. And so I had another opportunity here on Warm Springs to do the same thing. There's been generation of fish that have happened in this time frame over those 30 years, and no one's ever been able to fish it. So to be able to have that experience was just, it was just a huge honor. So I'm so thrilled to have gone with Elkie and Alicia on this trip. I mean, just wow. So anyway, so he picks me up in the big Suburban, and we start heading down, and I ended up landing that very first fish, and it was kind of cool. Alicia netted it for me and got a good release, and it was super cool. So we headed down and we're fishing, and I was catching some other fish, and I caught another real nice one. And this one, and by the way, these fish are hot, right? When a fish has not been caught, right? They're not, as Elkie says, they don't have sore mouths, right? They don't know when they get hooked, they just freak out, right? I was catching 13, 14 inch red band trout. As soon as you hook them, they would just take off, just peel and line off. I mean, these not big fish, they were nice fish, but they weren't huge, but they were pulling like an 18 or 19 inch rainbow trout, just these little fish. And the second really good one I caught, he took the TJ hooker, he jumped clean out of the air, he spit the hook, and then the tag line hooked him, and he just headed downstream. And I was pretty lucky to get that one in. I was using pretty heavy tippet because of the cloudy water, so I had about 3X tippet on, 4X on the dropper. But I was able to land that fish, and that was another nice 14, 15 inch red band trout out of this fishery. Just super cool. So Alicia asked, did you bring any sunscreen? Because it was warm. It felt good to stand in this cold water. I was like, why did I bring a hoodie with me? I was just starting to roast. And all of a sudden, you start looking off in the distance, and there's these black clouds. You can just see they're building and building. We didn't get into lightning, but we got into some rain. So the Elkie's saying, if it starts to rain, we got to hightail it out of here, because we're on this little skidder road that hadn't been traveled for a very long time, right? It barely had tracks on it. And so I didn't realize, so this red kind of powdery, loose dirt, you kind of sink into it a little bit when you walk through it. It's just kind of red and powdery dirt, almost like it is a clay. I didn't realize that add a little water to that, and it becomes this ridiculous sticky mess. So we were hightailing it back up to the rig, and as I'm walking through this red clay, it's building up on the bottom of my boots like snow does. Like every step I was getting a half-inch taller, because this clay just kept packing on to my boots. And by the time that I got up to the rig, I had what felt like 2 pounds each globs of this red clay stuck to the bottom of my boots. I mean, they're just muds everywhere, but we didn't have time to clean things off. We just jumped into the rig. Elkie put it in 4-wheel drive, had to put it in 4-wheel drive low, and we start heading out there. And immediately, we're in 4-wheel drive. Those big tires I told you about, they were just chewing in and quickly caking up with this clay. And we were sliding all over the place. And, we had a bank up to our right and down below. The river's like 50 feet down. So if we get sliding too far that way, and sometimes the road was pitched towards the river, we're going over. So it got a little scary for a minute. But Elkie knows how to drive a 4-wheel drive, and he was working hard to make sure that we kept us on the road. Now, he didn't look like he was breaking a sweat, but I got to tell you, I was just a little bit like, whoa, as we just kept kind of sliding. It brought me back to a time to where my dad, I don't know if my dad listens to this or not, but we had a van, like a Chevy van. And we would always go up to the mountains, up in Mount Rainier, and we're tooling around in the snow. It's a 2-wheel drive van, right? My dad, and this is probably where I get it from, he just wants to keep going higher and higher and goes as high as he possibly can. Started to get too much snow on the road, so he goes to make a 3-point turnaround. And as he did, I remember it as a kid, like this sheer drop off into 3,000 feet down to nothing. And we're sliding backwards as my dad is moving forwards towards this edge, and me being in the back seat with my brother, I'm looking out the window, and all I could see was edge. So that's kind of what took me back. I got that feeling again, like, oh crap, just bracing for impact. But you know what? I put positive energy out there. I knew Elkie knew what he was doing. We're going to get out of this, and we're going to be fine. So then we come up, and this rock is like sitting right in the middle of the road. And we don't want to kind of go around it because the road pitches around it, and sliding the way that we did, there was the potential for us to slide off the road and roll down the hill. So Elkie and I get out and we're like, all right, let's see if we can move this thing. And this thing wouldn't budge. It's a basalt, I think, rock, so it's super heavy. But it also, because it just started, because it just started raining, it was like welded into place, right? We moved it a little bit. You can see my boot slipping as I'm trying to shove this thing over, and both he and I, we could not lift it. So he put it in low, and just this perfect pivot around this rock. I mean, he probably just scraped that rock on the way by with his big tires and wheels, and we were able to get around it. But when we got to the end of the road, I mean, we're literally taking mud out of the rig and trying to knock it off our boots. And I mean, this stuff was welded on. It was nuts. And just with a flip of a switch, it goes from 65 degrees and sunny, beautiful out, to just pissing down rain and just craziness, right? It just like, where did this come from? And we kept seeing this blue sky off in the distance and hoping that it would come, but it just kept building and building. And as you can see, it never stopped. So it kind of, it's slowed the fishing down a ton when it started raining, and we were done with Warm Springs at that point because the roads are just it's too difficult to try to walk around or even drive around when that clay gets wet like that. So we headed to the Deschutes on the section that nobody else can fish unless you're with a tribal guide. So that was cool. And he was telling me about this spring that comes out of the water, right out of this white pipe. And again, it taken me back, right? This absolutely pure spring water. And I still got a bottle of it in the house because the last time that I tasted water like this was a pipe that came out of the Olympic National Forest up by, what's the Snohomish River. We go up there wild blackberry picking when I was a kid, and my dad, of course, go up these dirt roads for miles and miles and miles, and there was this pipe that just came right out of the side of the embankment, and it was spring water, and we would always stop and fill up the cups and drink some fresh spring water. And I remember just how pure that taste of pure spring water is. I mean, it really is like, not like bottled water or anything, definitely out of the tap. It just has this clarity and cleanliness to it and taste that it's just pure. So we filled up our water bottles and I just drank as much as I possibly could of this amazing water coming out this pipe right out of the ground. It's pretty cool. And it's always cold too. I mean, it feels like it's in the 40s, and evidently even when it's 100 degrees out here, it's still coming out at 40 degrees. So it's pretty cool. So we headed down to the Deschutes, and I saw it looked like it started to rain and really rain, and I put on my raincoat, and I'm still, I want to try to get at least one more fish. And it looked like their fish were like coming after something that was pre-emergent. But I couldn't, maybe it was because of the rain, or I couldn't get it out there well enough. The river is still really high. There's still a lot of runoff coming off of it. So it's not easy to wade. So Elkie and Alicia, they gave me the trout spay. Now, those of you that watch my channel, I haven't had a lot of luck when it comes to spay rods. I don't know. I'm not confident, which I think has something to do with it. And I just have a hard time casting. Well, Alicia gave me a lesson that actually was that I could really understand, right? There's a way to do the snap tee and the way that she explained it, it clicked. And so instead of 1 out of every 20 casts coming out the way it should, I was able to perform the snap tee, and I was bombing it out there 80 feet without a problem. And I was getting a good cast about 1 out of every 3. And it was so embarrassing. So she's down there, teaching me how to do it. And of course, I stacked up a couple casts and muffed a couple more. And she's, coaching me on, what it's going to be like when a fish hits it. And I wasn't prepared for the freight train type of smash that happens. And remember, these fish are on the reservation side, so they don't get a lot of pressure. So when they see a fly, they don't get shy. They go bonkers, and they will just want to destroy it. So that's what it was like, because I wasn't ready for it. And so she's kind of showing me the ropes on mending, and I was kind of doing a couple of the inside mends towards the end of the swing. and this fish just hammers it immediately. And I just fell apart. It was so embarrassing. So I thought the fish hit it, jumped, and was off. But what happened to it, so I stopped trying, basically. So what happened is the fish, though, was swimming upstream. It was probably 15, 16-inch big red band trout. He's swimming upstream. I'm literally handing the rod over to Alicia, and the fish is still on and jumps again. And I'm like, oh my God, what a rookie move. I mean, that is just like rookie move. So that just shows you, right? Fishing has a lot to do with confidence. And when I have a single-handed fly rod in my hand, I've got a ton of confidence. And that is why I garner a lot of success when I'm out there, because I'm confident. It's amazing when you put the energy out there and you put the thoughts out there that you're going to have success, you're going to have success. So I wasn't putting that same energy out there when I was on the spay rod. I'd given up on a beautiful fish that I hooked, and he was still on. And I could have landed my first fish on a spay rod. So, because I wasn't confident. But the experience was pretty cool. I had one other tug later, but then, we're in May. I am starting to shiver right out there because I got a little wet before putting on my raincoat, standing in pretty cold water. I'm up to my waist. I'm starting to get the shivers. So I was happy to finish the day. But what an amazing experience it was to fish with Elke and Alicia in a fishery that hadn't been touched for decades, to be able to land, to have the honor to land a fish that in that fishery that hadn't happened in decades. It was just super cool. And those guys, they work so hard, Alicia and Elke. I mean, and it's not, there's someone that would work hard because they feel that they're obligated to work hard. And then there's working hard because it's just ingrained in you and they really want you to have the experience. That's what Elke and Alicia brings to the table. You can just tell they're good human beings. They want you to be successful. They work really hard in getting on the fish. They get just as excited as I do when you get a fish on. I mean, they are just, I can't say enough about the experience that I had. So be sure to look them up. I'm going to leave their information down in the description. Again, there's no sponsorship. There's no affiliation. I paid for my trip. And I just wanted to highlight these very hardworking guides here on the Warm Spring Reservation, because there's somebody that you want to hire if you're going to come to the Bend area and want an experience in a fishery that Warm Springs is going to be open now, hopefully, for season after season. You're going to want to book a trip there and experience that, and you're going to want to fish this side of the Deschutes River that nobody else fishes, right? Unless you're with a tribal guide. And the fish there, they were telling me some stories of, I think, what did Elke say? It was like over a 10-pound bull trout that he caught. Alicia's personal best red side is a 26.5-inch red side. That's like a steelhead. That's like 5 or 6 pounds. And it was running downstream and running upstream and just going nuts. These things pull like a freight train. I can't imagine what it's like to hook a 26.5-inch red side. But they've caught big bull trout. They've caught, Elke was talking to me about a steelhead that he saw jump and flop that had to been pushing 30 pounds, all on the reservation side. And they can guide for steelhead almost year long. So I recommend hiring these guys and having the experience, because it's worth a weekend out here. And the rates are super reasonable. It was only $400 for a walk and wade for the day, and they worked really hard at it too. So I wanted to share this story with you while it was fresh in my mind, because it really was just a super cool experience. And I can't wait to build the video. And I'm not sure if the video will come out before the podcast comes out, but I'm going to B-roll in a lot of the stuff here. But I just wanted to thank you again for joining me. This is kind of a little bit of a shorter podcast, only about 25 minutes. But I just wanted to share that story with you because it was just super special, and it's going to be something that stays with me for a really long time. All right. Thanks again for tuning in to episode 5 of the Fly Fishing and Stuff podcast. All right. We'll catch you on the next one. All right, everybody. Fish on.
Want to ask Dan a fly fishing question? You can do just that in the comments below on YouTube or good old-fashioned email. Send your question to flyfishdan@gmail.com.